So fellas, it's no surprise that the Fighting Nerds might be the hottest gym in the UFC right now, and considering that Carlos Prates just knocked out Jeff Neal, we've got Borralho and Ruffy fighting this week, and next week we've got Silva. I thought now would be the perfect time to match the Fighting Nerds against every ranked opponent in their weight class. So I'm going to be ranking it by easily beat, so they easily beat these ranked opponents. They beat these ranked opponents, and they beat them but not too dominantly. They'll lose to these opponents, and then they get dominated by these certain opponents. And we'll start off with the leader of the Fighting Nerds in Caio Borralho, who's going to be main eventing this week. If we look at Borralho in the middleweight division, we'll start off by the middleweight that I think he easily beats. So the first middleweight that I think he easily beats, I'm just going to get it out of the way, is Jared Cannonier. This doesn't really need much explanation. We've seen this fight before as one of the only ranked opponents that Borralho's actually fought. And I'm not going to say dominated him across 5 rounds, but he was leading the fight. He was beating him on the feet, nearly finished him in the 5th round, got the win over Jared Cannonier and did it in pretty dominant fashion. So considering we've already seen this fight, it goes without saying he easily beats Jared Cannonier. And then I'll go with Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze next. These guys are just human punching bags. We saw them fight early this year in the main event, and they're two big dum-dums who swing at each other, don't really have the best defense, get caught a lot. I feel like this would be a walk in the park for Caio Borralho. Two guys with awful defense, kind of like human punching bags. I think Borralho would tee them off on the feet. Maybe not Vettori, but at least with Dolidze, if this was a 5-rounder, I think Borralho would probably finish Dolidze within 3 to 5 rounds. Don't have the best gas tank as well, so Dolidze and Vettori, I think Borralho would easily beat them. I'm also going to say Roman Kopylov. Kopylov has not been impressive in his last couple of fights. I had a lot of hype coming into the fight with Paulo Costa. He took an absolute beating by Paulo Costa on the feet. Couldn't really get going. Looked like he was gassing out as well. And on top of that, the grappling. We know that Borralho's got a good grappling background. We've seen we've seen Kopylov struggle with grappling before, even in the Costa fight, but specifically in the Anthony Hernandez fight. So I feel like Borralho wins this fight anyway. If he wants to grapple, he out-grapples Kopylov. If he wants to keep the fight standing, he probably wins there too by decision. So I think Kopylov would probably easily get beaten by Borralho. And then the middleweights that I think he beats, maybe not too dominantly, it would be a close fight, but the middleweights that I'd probably favour Borralho to beat. The first one they're going to go for is Brendan Allen, Anthony Hernandez, and Rene Derrida. Some of the top contenders, at least 2 of them are top contenders at middleweight. Yeah, these guys are all elite grapplers. You know, they're all elite grapplers. Some of the best grapplers right now in the middleweight division, apart from Chimaev. But I still feel like Borralho beats them standing. I feel like Borralho keeps the fight standing against all of these guys and beats them, because we know that Borralho comes from a bit of a grappling background, and none of these guys really have the best striking. Allen's improved this striking, but you put him against any competent striker, he gets picked apart. Rene Derrida is just goofy and weird, and he's probably the least threatening grappler out of the 3 of them. And Hernandez is definitely the best grappler and would be the toughest test. And I don't think Borralho would beat him comfortably. But again, Hernandez is very one-dimensional. His striking has improved in the Dolidze fight, but overall, pretty weak striker. And I feel like because Borralho is very well-rounded, he comes from a grappling background, he'd keep the fight standing and probably beat all 3 of these guys. Not too dominantly, wouldn't easily beat them, especially with Hernandez. But I'd favour Borralho to beat all of them. I'm also going to say MVP. Yeah, on the feet, MVP would be really tricky for Borralho, but MVP, even though it's improved, again, might be one of the worst grapplers in the middleweight division. Ian Gary dominated him with grappling for at least 10 minutes of their fight. Even Kevin Holland and Jared Cannonier was able to get some control time over MVP. You put him against Borralho, who's a better grappler than all 3 of those guys. I think he probably smothers MVP across 15 minutes. And again, even if the fight is standing, it isn't like Borralho's a fish out of water. He could probably hang in there with MVP on the feet. So I think because they're grappling, Borralho probably beats MVP too. I'm also going to say Paulo Costa, Robert Whittaker, and Israel Adesanya also get beat by Caio Borralho at this moment in time, because these guys just kind of represent the old, maybe not for Costa, but at least with Whittaker and Adesanya, they're all like elite strikers, but they can't keep up with the modern middleweights. You know, they were peaking in the Vettori era of the middleweight division. You know, Adesanya's had a bit of a fall off. He can't really buy a win. He's got knocked out by Imavov earlier on this year. His reaction time and his speed ain't the same. Whittaker looks like he's off a beat. He just lost in a pretty underwhelming fight with Rene Derrida. I think Borralho would piece him up too. Paulo Costa, I think, would lose to Borralho. He looked really good in the fight with Kopylov, so I'm not going to say, you know, Borralho dominates him or anything. And I don't think any of these guys get dominated by Borralho, but I'd probably favour at this moment in time Borralho to beat all 3 of these guys. Again, when you mix in the grappling, it's only going to make it worse for these guys. And I'm also going to say Strickland and Imavov also lose to Borralho. Yeah, these guys would probably make it as close as a 50-50 fight as you can with the Borralho. We've obviously got Borralho and Imavov taking each other on this weekend, and I said in the build-up this is a pretty much 50-50 fight, but I'm leaning towards Borralho winning. And Strickland and Borralho would be a pretty tough fight to pick, because Strickland's a walk-forward scrapper. Borralho's stand-up probably isn't on the same level as Strickland, but again, he's more well-rounded, so that would be a pretty 50-50 fight. So both these guys, I think, would be 50-50, but I'd probably lean towards Borralho winning, especially after Strickland's last performance, when he looked awful against DDP. Now, the middleweights that I think lose, or sorry, the middleweights that I think beat Borralho, not too dominantly, but pick up the win, I think, well, the only middleweight on this list, I think, is going to be Dricus du Plessis. I said it even before Dricus lost to Chimaev. Borralho stylistically is not an easy fight for DDP because of how well-rounded Borralho is. but I've got to go with DDP. You know, we took one loss to Chimaev. I can't now pick everybody to beat DDP, and I think DDP would find a way. He probably mixes the grappling up with the striking, makes it a bit overwhelming for Caio Borralho, especially across 15 minutes, and we've seen the likes of Cannonier steal rounds from Borralho too. I think you put him in there with DDP, who's pretty much perfect everywhere the fight goes against anyone that isn't Chimaev. I'm going to go with DDP, the weird, you know, managed to weird himself into a victory. So I'm going to say he loses to DDP, and I think he gets dominated by Khamzat Chimaev. This isn't anything to discredit Caio Borralho, it's just that Chimaev's that good. I think any middleweight in the fucking division gets ragdolled by Khamzat Chimaev at this moment in time, or at least most of them. I think the biggest threat to Chimaev would be Anthony Hernandez. I know Borralho comes from a grappling background, but I don't think it's enough to kind of stop the grappling of Chimaev. And I expect this fight to go very similar to DDP Chimaev. Chimaev maybe doesn't finish Caio Borralho, even though he has a good chance of doing so, but at least dominates him across at least 4 rounds out of 5. So I think he gets dominated by Khamzat Chimaev. So if we just look at the middleweight division, I think Borralho beats the vast majority of them, honestly. I think Borralho would probably get the win over the vast majority of middleweights. It obviously depends on how he does this weekend. I think when he gets to the likes of DDP and Chimaev, the champion-worthy guys, that's probably where I'm going to favour Borralho to fall short. But I think most of the middleweight roster, I'd probably favour Borralho to beat. And then we've got Carlos Prates in the welterweight division, obviously coming off that brutal KO over Jeff Neal. Now, the fighters that I think he easily beats, I'm going to say Jeff Neal. Again, just going to get it out of the way. We've just seen this fight like 2 weeks ago at the last pay-per-view. Prates battered him in the first round and then got a spinning elbow to knock him out and put the cherry on top. So that one goes without saying. I'm also going to say Gilbert Burns. Again, goes without saying. Burns is getting finished all the time these days. He's on a losing streak. He's beyond washed. Gilbert Burns gets knocked out by Prates. I'm going to say Gabriel Bonfim and D-Rod too. Yeah, Gabriel Bonfim and D-Rod, they're way too hittable. Stephen Thompson nearly finished Bonfim. Kevin Holland nearly finished D-Rod. You put him against someone as powerful as Carlos Prates, and I think he easily finishes those guys too. Then the middleweight, then the welterweights that I think Carlos Prates beats, maybe not so dominantly, but probably picks the win over. I'm going to say Colby Covington. Yeah, Covington, I don't think would be an easy win for Prates just because it is a grappling threat. And even though Covington's washed, he's probably the best wrestler that Prates would have fought at this moment in time. But again, considering that, again, Colby Covington is washed, he's getting dropped all the time these days when he is fighting, and he got a beating from Buckley last year. I think Prates would probably pick up a win and probably a finish as well over Colby Covington within 5 rounds. I'm going to say Kevin Holland, Leon Edwards, and Michael Morales too. Yeah, these guys are all elite strikers in the middleweight division and could make it super competitive with Prates. But I'm going to be honest, I think Prates sleeps all of them. Kevin Holland nearly got finished by Daniel Rodriguez. If you put him in there with Prates across 15 minutes, I don't think Kevin Holland's surviving. Leon Edwards is probably the trickiest out of the two of them. He's obviously going to be fighting Prates. And I've already done a bit of a prediction on this. I think Prates gets the win over Leon Edwards. I have not been impressed on the feet by Leon Edwards, even though he's only been facing grapplers in a couple of years. So I think Prates probably finds the chin out of all of them. I think Morales would be the most hard to argue for because we haven't seen Morales lose in the UFC so far. But I'm going to pick Prates to beat all of them. Because the thing with Prates, not only is he more dangerous than all 3 of them, I'd say he's arguably a better pure striker anyway. His Muay Thai, his range, his ability to mix things up with the kickboxing, and on top of that, like I said, he's got God-given power. So I think he'd probably manage to find a finish over all 3 of these guys. And I'm also going to say Joaquin Buckley. Buckley and Prates is a tough one because Buckley, the super, stocky, explosive striker in the welterweight division, and obviously Prates is similar too, but I'd probably pick Prates to pick up at Joaquin Buckley. I don't think Buckley would do much with the wrestling. I think it'll be a stand-up fight where Prates picks him apart, and in a 5-rounder potentially gets a late finish. Now, the welterweights that I think beat Carlos Prates, I'm going to say Ian Gary. Again, goes without saying, we just saw this fight earlier on this year. Gary won a decision, and he did it pretty comfortably too, so Ian Gary beat Prates. I'm also going to say the champion JDM beats him too. Now, I do think this is a tough fight for JDM because it would be a pure stand-up fight against the most dangerous welterweight, but I've got to go with JDM. He's the welterweight champion. He's undefeated in the UFC. He's got some of the best boxing in the UFC as well so far. I can't pick, Prates to beat fucking JDM because he beat Jeff Neal, so I'd expect JDM to pull off a decision whether Carlos Prates just picks him apart with the boxing. I'm also going to say Bilal Muhammad and Usman too. Yeah, Usman and Bilal, they're just too good at wrestling in my opinion to lose to Carlos Prates. To be fair, we've never seen Prates struggle with wrestling in the UFC, but we're talking about Bilal Muhammad, and even though Bilal couldn't really get it going against JDM, he's known for having super dominant wrestling. We saw this in the fight with Leon Edwards, who's known to having good takedown defense. I think Bilal probably out-grapples Prates across 25 minutes. And Kamaru Usman, again, one of the most physical wrestlers in the welterweight division, just dominated Joaquin Buckley, who again was supposed to have great takedown defense too. So I think both of those guys probably beat Carlos Prates. Now, the welterweights I think Prates gets dominated by, Surprisingly, I'm going to go with Sean Brady. I think Brady's one of the biggest untalked about, and I guess dark horses for the welterweight division. Not only do I think he's the most dangerous grappler in the sense, not only he's got amazing wrestling like Bilal Muhammad, but he has submission ability to go with that. He's got amazing submission ability. Just submitted Leon Edwards, submitted Gastelum last year as well. He's also got pretty sharp boxing too. I know people are going to bring up the fact that he got finished by Bilal on the feet, but since then he's improved his striking too. I think if he can mix the striking up with the grappling, Brady's going to be a nightmare matchup for Prates. I'm also going to say Shavkat Rakhmonov too, again, just from the grappling. I know we've never seen Prates struggle with the grappling, but you put him in there with the most dangerous welterweight on the planet, a guy who's finished nearly every single one of his fights, seems to be able to find the submission in most of his fights. Also, he's pretty slick on the feet too, so I think Prates probably gets dominated by Shavkat. So if we look at the welterweight division, I think Prates beats a good handful of them. I think Prates will get into the top 5 after beating Leon. I think it's when you approach that title area, the top contenders of the welterweight division, that's kind of where I feel like Prates is going to fall short. And then we'll go to Gene Silva in the featherweight division. Now, the featherweights I think he easily beats. I'm going to go with Josh Emmett, Pitbull, and Ige first. Yeah, these guys are all very similar in the sense that they're just weak strikers who rely on KO power. They all get absolutely picked apart and battered pillar to post by Gene Silva. Gene Silva absolutely smokes these guys twice on a Sunday, but they've got the KO power to back them up. All of them hit hard. It ain't working on Gene Silva. I think he beats the shit out of all of these guys, if I'm being honest. I'm also going to go Brian Ortega. If you're getting outstruck by Aljamain fucking Sterling in 2025, you get, you know, you and Gene Silva, you know, it's a death match. David Onama and Steve Garcia as well. Yeah, these guys are nowhere near the same level as Gene Silva. I feel like these are going to be guys that are going to leave the top 15 within a couple of months' time. Anyway, the featherweights, I think Gene Silva beats, maybe not easily, but still gets a comfortable win over. I'm going to go with a champ, Alexander Volkanovski. I've said it before multiple times. I think Gene Silva beats Volkanovski, and I say this because Volkanovski's biggest kryptonite seems to be power punchers, guys that can clock him on the feet, guys that can hit hard and find the chin of Alexander Volkanovski, and that's exactly what Gene Silva is. Not only is he a really slick technical striker, he hits like a truck, and he's obviously able to find the KO button a lot of the time. And we're talking about a 35-year-old Volkanovski at this moment in time who's had a shaky past couple of fights. You put him in there with Gene Silva, I don't know if that goes well for a Volkanovski. I'm also going to say Diego Lopez. He's obviously booked against Diego Lopez next week, and it is a really tough fight for Gene Silva because Lopez is legit. They've both got KO power. Lopez is still one of the most dangerous featherweights on the planet. Silva's one of the most dangerous featherweights on the planet, but something's telling me that Gene Silva gets the job done. The reason I put it in beats and not easily beats is, again, I don't really have too much justification. I've just, my gut feeling is that Gene Silva gets through against Diego Lopez. I'm also going to say Lerone Murphy. I keep saying this every time Lerone Murphy fights and he proves me wrong, but I feel like he is going to get chinned one of these days. He gets caught a lot, does Lerone Murphy. He nearly got knocked out by Dan Ige. Aaron Pico was able to find the shot a few times. Even Edson Barboza, when they fought, was tagging along on Lerone Murphy. I don't think Gene Silva would put himself in a position where he can get beaten anywhere. I don't think he gets outstruck by Lerone Murphy. I don't think he gets out-grappled by Lerone Murphy. I don't think Lerone Murphy finds the KO shot. I think this will be a pretty clear, unanimous decision win to Gene Silva, or a late finish where he just picks apart Lerone Murphy. And I'm also going to say Arnold Allen and Yair Rodriguez as well, because these guys have elite striking, and I think they'd make it really competitive with Gene Silva. But Yair Rodriguez obviously being really, really rangy. He's one of the best kickboxers in the division, and Arnold Allen's just a scrapper. He comes to scrap every single time. I can see Allen getting chinned by Gene Silva, though. Allen is a very kind of reckless guy on the feet. I can see Silva chinning him, and Yair Rodriguez, I think, would have to struggle with the grappling of Gene Silva as well. If you're telling me, you know, Yair and Gene Silva get booked right now, you ain't picking Gene Silva to win, you're just lying. So, yeah, those are the ones I think he beats. Now, the only kind of featherweight that I actually think could beat Gene Silva, and it might sound like I'm glazing him here, it's going to be Movsar Evloev, and that's not even a confident pick. Silva and Evloev is still like a pretty much 50-50 fight right now, but I think it's because we've never really seen Gene Silva struggle too much with wrestling, but he hasn't really fought a wrestler like that. He fought Bryce Mitchell, but Bryce Mitchell's a weak wrestler. I think you put him against the best wrestler in this division, Movsar Evloev, who isn't going to strike with him, who's not going to stand with him, who hasn't got bad wrestling either. I can see Evloev kind of cruising to a really boring decision over Gene Silva where he takes him down consistently, and to be fair, we did see even Charles Jourdain take down Gene Silva as well, so I think you put him against Evloev. It's probably the most tricky fight in the division for Gene Silva, but again, I don't think he gets dominated by Evloev. So if you look at the featherweight division, I think Gene Silva is an absolute... I honestly think he beats most of the featherweight division. I don't know. I would not, like... There's not a single featherweight on the planet right now that I can confidently say beats Gene Silva. I pick Evloev against him if they were to get booked, but every other featherweight I probably picked to beat Gene Silva. I think he's probably got the best chance of becoming a champion out of all the fighting nerds. So there's not a single featherweight on the planet I think presents too big of a threat to Gene Silva. And finally, Mauricio Ruffy, who's also going to be fighting this week. If we look at the lightweight division, the lightweights I think he easily beats. I'm going to say Michael Chandler, just because Michael Chandler is just a punching bag these days. Ruffy, it's just a free highlight reel. Michael Chandler nowadays is Mr. Highlight Reel for somebody else. He gets caught a lot. He's reckless. He's not exactly dangerous. He's past his prime. Ruffy, being the technical guy that he is, absolutely clips Michael Chandler early on. Probably makes a highlight reel out of it. So Michael Chandler would easily get beaten by Ruffy. I'm also going to say Benoit Saint-Denis is obviously booked against Benoit Saint-Denis this week, and I've already done a prediction on this video, but I feel like Benoit Saint-Denis' style is very in-your-face, a little bit reckless. And again, I feel like for someone as sharp and rangy as Mauricio Ruffy, he's going to be able to find the chin of Benoit Saint-Denis, especially in a 15-minute fight, and we've seen Benoit Saint-Denis fade before after the first round, so I'm leaning towards Ruffy winning this fight against Saint-Denis. And I'm also going to say Renato Moicano gets easily beaten by Mauricio Ruffy. Now, we have not really seen much grappling from Ruffy in the UFC, but from what we have seen, even on the Contender Series, he's shown to have pretty solid takedown defense, and Moicano's just a bit of a shit striker. You know what I mean? He nearly got knocked out by Jalen Turner. He's never really doing well on the feet. Even in the fight with Dariush, senile Dariush was able to catch Moicano at times too, so I think Ruffy would probably play with his food on the feet with Renato Moicano. Now, the lightweights that I think he beats, I'm going to say Gaethje, Hooker, and Alvarez are lightweights that I would probably favour Ruffy to beat at this moment in time. Yeah, some of these guys, especially Hooker and Gaethje, are like elite lightweights, but they kind of have the reputation of being scrappy dogfighters. They're very scrappy. They're made for dogfights. They're made for 3-round, 5-round wars, whatever you may say, and they are really fun to watch, but again, they get caught a lot, and that's not something I favour against Mauricio Ruffy, because Mauricio Ruffy, I mean, we saw him against James Lontop, and I know you can't really compare James Lontop to fucking Justin Gaethje, but he does well in these sort of fights, where it's like a bit of a firefight against somebody who's willing to engage back, and he has insane accuracy, so I think he likely wins a close decision against these guys. If it's 5 rounds, I'd probably favour Hooker and Gaethje to beat him, but in a classic 3-rounder, I can see him teeing apart Dan Hooker and Justin Gaethje and Alvarez in a 3-round war, just because he's that slick on the feet, and I kind of feel like he represents this new generation of fighters, this new generation of lightweight. And I'm also going to say Charles Oliveira. That's a massive step up, but I think Oliveira probably gets beaten by Ruffy nowadays. Oliveira's had his way. I don't want to start calling him washed because he's taken a loss to Topuria, but, you know, he just got knocked out brutally by Ilia Topuria at 35 years old. Even Michael Chandler nearly finished him in the 5th round of their fight before this. And his career's not been the same. It seems like Oliveira, he's just getting, again, I don't want to critique him because he's losing to the best, but he's just looking worse with every performance. And you put him against, again, a guy as slick as Mauricio Ruffy. I could definitely see Oliveira getting having success with the grappling against Ruffy, but you know, Oliveira doesn't really get... Even Oliveira's wrestling isn't that good as well. You look at most of Oliveira's submissions, it comes from people falling into the guard and, you know, trying to go for the finish when he's already been dropped. I don't think Ruffy would do that. I think this fight stays standing, and Ruffy kind of tags apart Oliveira until he drops him and goes for the finish. So I'd probably pick Ruffy to beat Oliveira. And I'm also going to say Dariush. Yeah, Dariush is just a Ruffy victim. He has Ruffy victim written all over it. I know he's coming off that win over Moicano, but he gets chinned all the time. He's a very chinny guy, is Dariush. Chinned by Sarukian, chinned by Oliveira. Ruffy would chin him too. And I'm also going to say Grant Dawson. Yeah, Grant Dawson's got really good point wrestling. He is one of the better wrestlers in 155 is Grant Dawson, but that's kind of all he has. He's very clippable on the feet. His striking's weak. He hasn't really got too much finishing ability too, so I could definitely see Ruffy clipping Grant Dawson, or at least picking him apart to get a decision win. Now, the lightweights that I think he loses to, first of all, I'm going to go with Max Holloway Fiziev to beat the lightweights, or the strikers that I think beat Ruffy, and that's because I feel like they're likely on a level above Ruffy now. It's just too early to say that Ruffy beats these guys. Holloway, especially at 155, is one of the best strikers in the UFC. At 145, he was a beast, but he's a different breed at 155. I cannot pick Ruffy to beat Holloway. And Rafael Fiziev, I mean, the guy's one of the best strikers in the UFC. He's so slick with just some against Bahamondes, and he looked great in that matchup. And again, I feel like they'd just be too good, too much of a step up for Mauricio Ruffy. I mean, we saw Mauricio Ruffy knock out Bobby Green. I can't, from that performance, say that he beats the best strikers at 155 in Fiziev and Holloway. So I feel like these guys being as good as they are on the feet, I've got to pick them against Mauricio Ruffy at this moment in time. If Ruffy can go out there and do a number and do something crazy on Saint-Denis, maybe my answer changes, but right now, I've got to pick Holloway and Fiziev over Ruffy. I'm also going to say Mateusz Gamrot and Paddy Pimblett probably beat Ruffy as well, and that's because they're likely too big of a grappling threat. Mateusz Gamrot's one of the best, if not the best wrestler right now at 155. His wrestling's amazing. Doesn't really have the striking to go with it, but his pure wrestling is some of the best, and because we've never really seen Ruffy get tested with takedown defense too much, I've got to pick Gamrot to beat him. And even Paddy Pimblett, I could see Pimblett getting dropped on the feet by Ruffy and picked apart, but we've just seen Paddy Pimblett, who's by the way, behemoth for 155. Look amazing in his last two as he dominated Bobby Green and Michael Chandler. So I'm probably going to have to pick Gamrot and Paddy Pimblett to beat him too. Now, the lightweights that I think he gets dominated by is essentially the elite. First of all, Ilia Topuria. Topuria's in a level of his own. I think Topuria, if he confidently said that he's going to go out there and chin Ruffy, I think he'd do it. I know, so he's got the grappling to go with it as well. Topuria, he's in a world of his own. I've got to go with Topuria to finish Ruffy. I'm also going to go with Makhachev, who's still ranked at 155. I mean, we're talking about Makhachev. He's the most well-rounded, not the most well-rounded, but one of the most well-rounded and one of the best grapplers in the UFC. I think he'd take down Ruffy and probably find a submission within a couple of rounds. And I'm also going to say Tsarukyan too. Similar to the Gamrot situation, Tsarukyan, not only is he just a good wrestler, but he's dangerous as well. He's ground and pound, he's vicious, he's decently athletic on the feet, doesn't really get tagged too much on the feet as well. So I've got to go with Tsarukyan to dominate Ruffy with the grappling. So if we look at Mauricio Ruffy, I do think there's a lot of big tests for him at 155. I think Topuria, Makhachev, Tsarukyan, Holloway, Pimblett, Gamrot, and Fiziev. As of right now, I've got to pick them to beat Ruffy, but everybody else, I think Ruffy would get the job done. But that is me matching the fighting nerds against every ranked opponent in their weight class. Let me know if you agree with some of the matches and some of the results I've said, or if you think it'd go a different way. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.